live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman, Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, May 8th, 2020. Trying to take a look at things. Oh, yeah, am I getting kind of an echo here? Okay, I think I know what I might have changed that might be producing that, but maybe this will change things a little bit. All right, a little bit of an echo, reports Justice Putnam. So I was taking a look at things yesterday. I had my soundboard set up in such a way that it looked wrong to me. It looked like my output was set to the wrong place. It was, you don't care, honestly. But anyway, I switched it. And I said, that doesn't seem right. I think I used to have it set to this, and maybe it got switched. I've been moving the microphone around a little bit. I've been cheating on you all, using my fantastic radio microphone to have better sound quality on various Zoom meetings that I have to attend for other reasons. And everyone is so impressed with my voice sound quality that I just want to use it all the time. And I thought, maybe moving the microphone input has screwed things up. And the answer is no. I guess I must have reset it at some point very smartly to avoid the echo that I was just told was maybe going out on the stream. So, all right, it doesn't sound like that to me, but I take his word for it. I think he knows what he's talking about. You know how echoes sound. Maybe it was bothering you too. This is exciting news, and why not focus on this when a bazillion people are out of work, having lost their jobs in the past week. They were already out of work, lost their jobs the week before. No one knows where they last put their jobs, so there's no chance of finding them again, and everybody's confused about the outcomes. Well, okay, at least we have the settings right here. By the way, not very smartly, I never wrote down exactly why all the settings were where they were and what they were supposed to be. So if there's ever any kind of disaster, like you should be preparing for ahead of time, whether it be pandemic or power outage of some kind or a computer death of some kind, there's likely no way back from that. And I guess I've just given myself an assignment. Now I know what to do with my weekend. Excellent. Daily Coast Radio is live now. I am told by Bill in Portland, Maine, who can tell me that because his computer is all set up correctly and he knows what to do if something goes wrong. Daily Coast Radio is live now, though we may never be again. Today, American Warrior, Kagro X. We're all American Warriors. That's how it happened. So fantastic. That's me, Kagro X. David Waldman, you may know me as. And then what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be kicking my radio show up to lava level. Yeah, I guess we'll have to cover that news. President Trump apparently reaching lava level mad yesterday. And there's a note here. Note, your lights may flicker for the next 2 hours. This is normal. Don't worry about it. And don't write down any of your computer settings if it should knock you offline. Don't worry about it. Just wing it. And if it doesn't work, you just get lava level mad. Yeah, all right. Well, the key issue here that we're kidding about this morning is the lava level madness of Donald Trump. Let's see. I think that refers to a note yesterday on a story that you'll never believe it. There's another person who works in or has been in close proximity to Donald Trump. He's a businessman from New York, was big in real estate in the 80s, hasn't had anything go on since except for the reality show wherein he plays, and that's, I know it's weird, a reality show where he plays a businessman. Well, I'm told that allegedly this guy thinks he's president of the United States, and so everybody's been paying attention to him since. As it turns out, we've told the Navy, the United States Navy, that he's the president of the United States. And they sent an elite naval warrior. I guess this is apparently an elite rank thing you get to do. You get to come and serve as the president's, like George Costanza would say, you get to be the president's butler. You're the president's valet. The president has a valet, not valet parking. They already have a limousine for him. He's a valet, like in the old school. No one really knows, actually, what he does. But is he a valet in the old school sense, like Downton Abbey? Yeah, that's my own. I say old school, but I was never at that school. I failed out of that school, and the only one I was able to see was I went to school online with Downton Abbey, and they told me that in 1915, if you were an extraordinarily rich person, you would have a valet, and he would pick out shirts for you. Now, that sounds very nice, but I watched the show. Did you watch the show? All the shirts are white. So that's the job. I don't know what to tell you. And I guess now I understand why our unemployment rate is so high. No one thinks they need anybody to pick out shirts. Now, Trump's wardrobe isn't all that varied, although I think he has some shirts that aren't white, but not very many. But I guess as president, you get a valet because the Navy has nothing to do, possibly. And I think the guy. I mean, I think what he does during the day is. I thought there was a butler, and other service staff at the White House who would get him Diet Cokes when he hits the button. But I understand that the valet now does that. And, well, President Trump, he's a maverick. He threw out the rule book. The rule book said the butler brings you the Diet Cokes, but not Donald Trump. He wants the valet. He wants it done his way. The valet I don't know what the valet does. Nobody knows what the valet does. The only thing anybody knows about the White House valet is he's positive for COVID-19 now. And that's what allegedly has the president, this guy from the TV show, lava level mad. And I think I put some of the stories aside. It's an important story. We're battling this COVID-19 pandemic. He's supposed to be in charge of fixing it. He's not. That's another story. I mean, maybe you want to start with that story, and then we'll get to the lava level mad. I think it'll all work out if we do things that way. No guests today. We get to wander through the news as we choose. Not that there's no presence for our regular guests today. For instance, the first story comes to me via Greg Dworkin, who retweeted it earlier this morning. This is a Jonathan Corner story. Jonathan Bernstein writing in Bloomberg here. As the crisis worsens, that's the COVID-19 one that I was telling you about. As the crisis worsens, Donald Trump, the guy I was telling you about, dithers. Can you believe it? It's right here in the headline. The president still shows no sense of urgency in dealing with the pandemic, and Senate Republicans are along for the ride. And really, that's the whole show. In a nutshell, the last couple months of the show. This is it. The plan is no plan. And I think he's still essentially, he doesn't say it anymore, but it's still essentially his plan that the pandemic will go away. And there's various jargon words that he can use to try to convince you that he's studied some things or read some papers, herd immunity, whatever it is. And I guess Nate Silver is out there debating what it is and isn't with epidemiologists. So renewing the epidemiologist statistician debate, that's going really well. But it's clearly Trump's thing is, I don't know what you do in a situation like this. And ordinarily, you have people in the government who know what to do in these situations. And in exchange for listening to them and allowing them essentially to call the shots behind the scenes, they are ordinarily very happy to allow the president to make it look on TV like he's the one who understands things and has studied up and learned. And, a good president, like a good manager anywhere, shares the credit and says that it's his experts that are keeping him up to date, and occasionally will introduce those experts or acknowledge them at a press conference. And that's enough to keep the exchange going. But this guy, interestingly, we got to put a businessman in the White House. It's called management. Mr. Management, President Great Deals, hasn't been able to maintain that kind of relationship with the experts, many of whom he's fired. And therefore, he has, very limited access to actual expert opinion about what to do in these situations. So he's really just giving up. I don't know. Nobody could have foreseen this. It's beyond our control. No country in the world is able to contain this thing except every country in the world. Again, check in with the Worldometers charts. We stopped last night just shy of 75,000 dead. So that we're once again, minutes away. As soon as they start reporting numbers this morning, we'll be across the 77,000 threshold. I think things froze around 76,900 last night. So, and we're about to pass the 1.3 million confirmed cases mark, and I can check in on how long it took us. I've been keeping track on Twitter. How long does it take us to get to 1 million? And then from 1 million to 1.1, then to 1.2, and now we'll have 1.3. And it's really only a matter of usually about 4 to 5 days to add another 100,000 cases at this point. Anyway, so I think he's just sort of, rolling along, thinking maybe it'll go away, maybe it won't. Jonathan Bernstein thinks so too and wrote so this morning. I write this, he says, just before we learn how historically bad the unemployment numbers for April will be. I write after the U.S. death toll from the pandemic passed 75,000. And how is the President of the United States dealing with these disasters? Passive resignation. And you should never forget the fact that Senate Republicans seem to be on the same page. Just as we learned yesterday, they're on the same page with respect to his abandonment of, anything. The rule of law, rational basis for federal policy decisions, etc., blocking the CDC from publishing reopening guidelines is what I was thinking of yesterday. We didn't even get to what's going on in the judicial branch with the DOJ, and this is kind of becoming a bit of a confusing situation, but the DOJ apparently petitioning the courts to drop the charges against notorious international spy and one-time national security advisor for the United States, Mike Flynn. So this is sort of like a preemptive pardon. We won't wait for him to be sentenced and sent to prison to pardon him. We'll try and drop the case before it gets to that point. I don't know if it's going to work the way they think, but it's a signal that the guy's not going to be held accountable for any of his spycraft. Anyway, back to the story here. So passive resignation and the Senate Republicans seem to be on the same page. President Donald Trump is so far from aggressively acting against the virus that he was about to disband the task force meant to deal with it before he caved to outraged reaction. So is that what's happened? Did the reverse psychology thing work and he's going to keep it for a while? Now he's merely burying his administration's systematic reality-based plan for reopening the economy while treating the virus that's killing 2,000 Americans a day as a messaging problem. Yes, the work of government goes on despite the president's apparent indifference, but for every achievement, testing levels continue to increase. For instance, that's really it. That's the instance. There's at least one more fiasco, and that's linked. What is the new fiasco? Oh, yes. The new fiasco is that the Trump quote-unquote administration is having difficulty now that they've actually... You remember the other miracle drug that at one point Trump had the chance to throw his weight behind, but he went with hydroxychloroquine or hydroxyboner cream 3000 as they called it over at Wonkette. The other one was the remdesivir. And I remember them dropping that name along with the hydroxychloroquine. And Trump decided to back the hydroxychloroquine horse, and it was the wrong one. And it turns out that remdesivir is the one that's more promising. It's not a cure. It's not what they were hoping for. Trump, and maybe that was it. Maybe the information was early on, remdesivir shortens the length and severity, lowers the severity of the attack of coronavirus in some patients, versus the extraordinary claim that hydroxychloroquine not only would cure it, but could in fact prevent it. And that was much more exciting. So he backed that one. And the more reality-based study was boring to him. Now that one turns out to be working somewhat. And so, okay, we could be getting that to the hospital. Remember that they they put aside federal money at the president's urging and Republican senators' urging to buy massive quantities of hydroxychloroquine, and setting aside all the logistics issues that Greg told us about what happens to those things now, there was a huge amount of money wasted on these things, and now they'll be sitting in warehouses with no way to get rid of them, even for people who need them for illnesses in which it's proven to be effective. And who knows whether they'll ever be able to distribute those things. Anyway, Jonathan Bernstein continues, nor is there anything resembling urgency on the economic front. That's the other big story of the day. Jobs report is out. Not good. Either from Trump or from Senate Republicans. Why no urgency? Greg Sargent of the Washington Post suggests that Trump is convinced that his only way out is to, quote, create the illusion that the country is returning to normalcy, walking around without a mask, saying we're going to open, just saying it's over, it's disappearing, denying that any further deaths are actually due to COVID-19, et cetera, whatever it is. And now disputing the authenticity of the numbers. That'll play a part in it, too. All right, well, he's going to create the illusion of return to normalcy, and that he's so keen to do so, says Greg Sargent, that he's actively blocking real progress, since that would shatter the illusion. Perhaps it's true that Trump said once again this week that testing makes things, quote, look bad. So he's right back to where he was at Diamond Princess time. I hesitate to call Sargent's theory it says here, hashtag clever fallacy. The pundit tendency to ascribe clever motives to things that Trump simply does at random, because there's nothing very clever about his version of Trump. And I think what he means here is, I hope, because, well, this is how I would assess it. It's not that Greg Sargent's idea of what Trump is doing isn't right or therefore clever, but rather that I don't think Sargent thinks that Trump is particularly clever person. I think he has said he views him as somebody who's just relatively speaking stupid and reacting at random to things as they come with no overall plan or vision for what to do. Relying on spin instead of attempting to solve problems is bad strategy for a president seeking re-election, but my guess is that it's wrong nevertheless. I don't think Trump is actively doing much of anything. I see. Yeah, although, I think the one thing he's active in is when something comes up that he feels like, hey, that'll be bad for me. He just says, just don't do it. He's not clever in coming up with plans to execute his policy against doing things in ways that would, say, stand up in court or make any sense to anyone with half a brain. He just says, don't do it. If the court says we have to, make them come and arrest us, I guess. Don't do it. All right. Jonathan continues. Take, for example, the looming meat shortage. Yeah, by the way, I'm wondering when that's going to hit. Maybe it won't. That would be great. As far as I can tell, Trump ignored this growing problem for weeks. He then focused on it long enough to issue a proclamation, forgetting that presidents can't actually do much by just signing edicts. As the BBC put it, what do they know? Although President Donald Trump issued an executive order last week deeming meatpacking facilities critical infrastructure, 7 more plants have shut down since then. So it doesn't sound like it's working. Trump, however, seems to think he solved the problem. There's no follow-up, no plan, no nothing, and in the supermarkets soon, perhaps no beef and no pork. Probably be good for us, really. Health-wise, short term. Anyway, the one thing Trump may have going for him is that most voters probably find it difficult to believe that the president isn't working hard to solve either the public health crisis or the economic disaster. But with the effects so obvious, that may not last for long. I think that's actually the conclusion of his article. There's a weird list that appears afterwards, which I think is just links to, disguised links to other stories about coronavirus. But that seems to be the key graph there. So it felt anticlimactic, but that's what Greg pointed up as the key graph here. The one thing that Trump may have going for him, it might actually be working out there, is that most voters, still relatively disengaged people, most voters probably find it difficult to believe that the president isn't working hard to solve either the public health crisis or the economic disaster, especially since he now says, I'm working hard to solve the economic disaster. He's not, but it's hard to believe that the president of the United States, because, we've had other ones, 44 other ones who have been, relatively speaking, better, well, certainly better than this one. And when they said we're going to work hard to do that, even if you didn't believe they were working hard to do it, you believed that there were people in government who were working hard, at least working hard to not get yelled at by the president or the White House chief of staff for not working hard. So, I think that's an accurate assessment of things. So many more stories to try and turn to. Let me see what else we can cram in here. We stretched that one out and that and the chatter out for quite a while. Let's see. That's definitely a good starting point. I would say maybe we'll get over to should we get to the lava level mad stuff? Where did that even come from? I think this NBC News story is going to cover it. I threw so many things into Pocket yesterday that I'm not even certain we got to all those things. And I think they make mention of the valet who's now sick. I have an NBC News article that covers two things. I think it might cover the lava level mad thing. If not, just take my word for it. I'll try and find that. You can search it on Twitter and come up with where it actually went through. Let's see. But right up at the top, NBC News tells me, here's the news on the unemployment. Breaking. U.S. economy lost unprecedented 20.5 million jobs in April. Unemployment soars to 14.7%. What the hell do you have to lose, everybody? Remember where he was going to get unemployment down to historic levels, and it was going to be like that forever, and things were going to be awesome. All right. Well, the NBC News story that I grabbed is chiefly about the very strange message that Trump tells allies his wearing a mask would, quote, send the wrong message and make him look ridiculous, which is maybe the most amazing thing I've ever heard coming out. I mean, literally might be the most amazing thing I've ever heard coming out of the Trump White House. The idea that Donald Trump worries about looking ridiculous, that's huge news, because he always looks ridiculous, and he's done nothing about it in this entire time. I had to tweet out every ridiculous photo I have yesterday of Donald Trump saying, well, a mask would make me look ridiculous. The guy paints these outrageous reverse raccoon eyes in orange on his own face every day and is captured on camera all the time. He's got to see the pictures of himself. And, that's not ridiculous. But the mask, oh my God, what are you, crazy? That's a bridge too far. I don't know. Anyway, subheader says the president said doing so, wearing the mask, would make it seem like he is preoccupied with health instead of focused on reopening. And they go hand in hand. He doesn't understand why they do. He's a very, very stupid person. It's really so sad. I mean, I want to insult him because he's an asshole and everybody hates him. But I want to stress for the first-time listener, absent my desire to personally insult the president because he's a horrible, horrible person, and accurately report how stupid he is, I'm looking at this picture that accompanies the NBC News piece of him at the face mask factory with no face mask on, standing there in safety goggles, which he wore because safety, but no mask, even though people are supposed to wear masks everywhere and certainly there. And he's just sitting there with the dumbest, most vacant look on his face, and his idiotic hair slicked back with God knows what viscous substance. I have no idea. He's a slob. He's disgusting. He's stupid. He's vicious. All of these things. And it's just so hard to look at him and say, that guy deserves, animation. That guy deserves to be alive. One of the cruelest ironies of this whole thing is that he didn't die of COVID-19 immediately. I don't understand that. But the fact that his valet now has it leads me back to the theory that he's just one continuous asymptomatic super spreader node, everyone who comes near him, whether it's the delegation from Brazil or the RNC chair or now his valet, they all come away with COVID, and everyone's scratching their head. I don't understand. Ooh, how's this happening? All right, well, here's the story. It's actually AP reporting it, and NBC News just grabbing it up and adding it to their lineup. President Donald Trump has been mask averse for weeks. Within minutes of the CDC announcing its updated mask recommendations last month, the president said, "I don't think I'm going to be doing it." We all remember that. Trump has told advisors that he believes wearing one would send the wrong message. We read about why it sends the right message. According to one administration and two campaign officials not authorized to publicly discuss this stupid conversation. The president said doing so would make him seem like he's preoccupied with health instead of focused on reopening the nation's economy, even though everyone who's going to reopen it has got to wear masks when they do it. But, he just doesn't make those kinds of connections. And, of course, he's into the economy thing because everybody says that's the only way he's going to get reelected. Moreover, Trump, who is known to be especially cognizant of his appearance on television, has told confidants that he fears he would look ridiculous in a mask and the image would appear in negative ads, according to officials. And they might be sort of a Dukakis moment for him. Plus, it would smear the makeup and a white mask would show streaks of orange on it. That part is true. He would look ridiculous doing that. But, he could wear less makeup. That would be one other thing. It's a vanity thing with him, I guess. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said of Trump on MSNBC, "You'd think that as president of the United States, you'd have the confidence to honor the guidance he's giving the country." But he's not giving any guidance, so I guess he's exempt from that. That's left those around him unsure of how to proceed. White House aides say the president hasn't told them not to wear them, but few do. Some Republican allies have asked Trump's campaign how it would be viewed by the White House if they were spotted wearing a mask. According to two campaign officials who spoke on condition of anonymity, I guess people are worried, if I wear a mask when I'm not around you, is it going to get back to you, and are you going to ridicule me and not endorse me for my re-election? That's like a real problem in Trump world. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll continue on because this is a great Cedar story for the rest of the show, I think, with the NBC, the NBC carriage of the AP story about how he's not wearing masks. President won't wear masks, sends the wrong message, etc. It's becoming a political thing. Lots of people reporting around the country that Republicans refer to them as Democrat masks, and that you can tell people's political affiliations by whether they're wearing them or not. I don't know how accurate that is, but it feels like it. Feels like you could probably jump to that conclusion. You'll be wrong occasionally. Somebody maybe just doesn't have a mask available to them, or maybe there are some paranoid Republicans out there too. Occasionally you see people protesting the big hoax in a mask. That happens too. Anyway, yeah, it's carrying political messaging, and that's where this article picks up again. The decision to wear a mask in public is becoming a political statement, a moment to pick sides in a brewing culture war over containing the coronavirus. I mean, things don't work that way, but there we are. While not yet as loaded as a Make America Great Again hat, the mask is increasingly a visual shorthand for a debate pitting those willing to follow health officials' guidance and cover their faces against those who feel it violates their freedom or buys into a threat they think is overblown. Once again, I know we've made this point a number of times, but I feel compelled to make it again. The problem here is I hope no one's both sidesing this, and I don't think I've actually seen people do this, but they do so in a different and subtle sort of way. To say this is two sides of a culture war is, I think, well, it gives too much credit to what is a misunderstanding on the part of the side, the no mask side. It's their perception still that wearing a mask means you're afraid of catching the virus, as opposed to I'm following the instructions, which are, and they get mad about that too. You're just following, you're just a follower, you're a sheep, you do whatever they tell you. But it's like covering your mouth when you sneeze, which ordinarily used to just be kind of like normal politeness protocol. Cover your mouth when you yawn, cover up when you sneeze or cough, because you don't want to spray germs on other people. And that's what wearing the masks are about. And they still either don't get it or just refuse to get it. Instead, it's, you're afraid of getting the virus. And afraid means you're a wimp. And Republicans like us, we're not wimps. And that's why I'm not wearing masks. Besides which, I heard it's not that bad. And if you get it, you'll live. And the whole thing is overblown, et cetera, et cetera. Well, but again, the masks don't prevent you from getting it. That's not really the point. But they don't want to know, I don't care what the point is. I know I don't understand the real thing, but you do. You're a nerd, so who cares? And that's the entirety of it. That's the culture war part of it. I don't want to know things versus I heard, I understand this is the way the world works, and I'm going to do that, And there's a lot of, there's also still, of course, the element of owning the libs to it. It's going to make people upset if I don't wear a mask. So, and they may even know intellectually in the back of their minds, well, the offense really is to other people. The mask isn't going to protect me from getting it, so F it. From that sense, I'm not going to wear it. And if the mask makes me an outcast among the stupid libs that I want to own, then fine, good. I'm glad to do it that way. And that's basically where we are. Meanwhile, by the way, the Trump campaign is ordering branded Trump 2020 campaign face masks, and sometimes giving them out as a premium or selling them as tchotchkes, whatever. So, mixed messages, but so what? Again, it's Trump does whatever the hell he feels like at the moment. I'm not going to wear a mask because I feel like it makes me look silly. People who support me shouldn't wear masks. Well, I got an idea, boss. How about if we make masks that say, Trump 2020, make America great again, or keep America great, etc., and we sell them to people. We make money on them. Oh, okay, yeah, selling them and making money on them is a good thing. Well, someone could say we give them away for free to VIPs. Yeah, good. I love giving free stuff to VIPs. So go ahead. All right. Well, there we are. The resistance is fueled, I guess the resistance to masks, they continue on here, fueled by some of the same people who object to other virus restrictions. The pushback has been stoked by Trump. He didn't wear a mask during a Tuesday appearance at a facility making them, and some other Republicans who have flouted rules and questioned the value of masks. It's a development that has worried experts as Americans are increasingly returning to public spaces. I don't know. Do we care about the rest of the story? He's wrong about the masks. There's some other instances, Trump or Pence going to the Mayo Clinic, Andrew Cuomo saying you're stupid if you don't wear the masks, or it's disrespectful, or whatever. You get the idea. What else is there to take out of this? Well, one, maybe now we switch over to the lava level mad story to put the next thread in place. Also at NBC, and I guess it's their own reporting here, Peter Alexander, Shannon Pettypiece, and Monica Alba reporting for NBC on this one. Trump's personal valet tests positive for coronavirus. The president and the vice president have since actually tested negative, the White House said Thursday. So we only learned of the valet testing positive yesterday. So there really wasn't much time for them to test negative since then, but they have the rapid test. I don't know when they found out that the valet was positive, but it seems like it was a couple of days ago, which brings the interesting connecting thread then between the two NBC stories is, as the first one mentioned, Trump didn't wear a mask at the mask factory, which is odd, but okay. if he says he's going to look ridiculous in a mask, you would think normally you'd tour a mask factory. Even if you're going to say, I don't ordinarily plan on wearing a mask, you would try the mask on just to show, here's me and your product. And, oh yeah, very comfortable. And everyone's going to love having these fantastic face masks, which I saw being made. But he says no pictures of him with the mask on, so he doesn't try it on. Fine and dandy, a little stupid thing to do in a mask factory to snub their product like that. The workers probably a little bit pissed off, but the ones who are fans are going to stay fans, et cetera, et cetera. The bigger issue is if Trump's personal valet is positive, and they found that out either yesterday or a couple of days ago, but only told the president now. In other words, if the valet has been around him positive for some amount of time, it's not clear how often they test the valet. It might be weekly. Well, as it turns out, you can be positive and asymptomatic, obviously. You can probably also have it and not show up necessarily on every test they give you for a little while, too. So there's some possibility that the valet has been walking around bringing Diet Cokes to Trump positive for, enough time that Trump, too, could eventually turn up positive. Now, ordinarily, I'd say, fantastic, good. Give Donald Trump, why am I going to dance around the subject? Hooray! My fondest wish, among them, at this point, is that Donald Trump will get and die from COVID-19. I know some people say that, but it's not an assassination. It's just natural causes, man. He got a germ and he died. He's been afraid of that his whole life, reportedly. I have my doubts about whether he's a real germaphobe. But, look, he's always been afraid of germs, and with good reason. Now it's killed him. Aww, we're very sad. We'll have a funeral. There'll be we'll have to do the whole state funeral thing, which is extraordinarily annoying. But good riddance. Dead is dead, if you ask me. Okay. Anyway, so the bigger issue, though, is I don't think you see it coming. The valet gives him COVID before anybody finds out that the valet is positive. Trump tests negative initially, later tests positive, what have you. The question then is he capable of passing it on? And did he go to a factory where they are working 24/7? And I don't know whether this is one of those situations where the factory workers are living at the factory for like month-long shifts so that they can work the mask manufacturing 24/7 to catch us up. Or maybe Trump doesn't care about that stuff and he says, knock off for a couple weeks. You guys take it easy. Anyway, the point is the people who are producing masks, actually producing masks, not just pretending they are procuring them from overseas or elsewhere and then having the contract fall apart and keeping the money anyway or what have you through Project Airbridge piracy program. But people who are actually Americans really actually making masks in America and selling them for the right price of like $1.27 a piece, no markup, etc. This is the best deal going on masks. Did Trump carry his coronavirus from the valet into the mask factory and leave it behind on every surface that he went through? And is he going to sicken the people who we're all depending on to make the goddamn masks for the hospitals? That's the situation we're actually looking at here. And we don't know. We don't know. We'll see what we can find out. Here's the news about him being lava level mad. One of President Donald Trump's personal valets, he's got several apparently, who works in the West Wing serving the president his meals. Again, I was sure they had a different staff for this, but apparently not. Among other duties, has tested positive for the coronavirus. The closest the virus is known to have come to the president, a White House official said. No, it's in the president, and that's how Bolsonaro got it, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know why we deny this. Since the White House medical unit was made aware of the case, Trump and Vice President Pence have both tested negative. White House spokesman Hogan Gidley said Thursday, he's probably lying because his name is Hogan Gidley, the White House did not say when the valet developed symptoms or when the president was last exposed to the individual or when he may have exposed himself to that individual, for all I know. Maybe if you choose shirts, maybe you choose underpants. What do I know? Maybe it happens. I don't know what valets do. Anyway, keep in mind also, I guess throughout all of this, I'm sure it's occurred to you, there's no way in the world if the president were positive for coronavirus, they would admit that. I think he's been positive for coronavirus for a long time. I thought in those initial press conferences right around mid-March, he sounded hoarse and strained in his speaking. He may just have had a mild form of it. And you know that if he were positive, he would order everyone in the White House to cover that up. If you think he thinks wearing a mask would make him look ridiculous, there's nothing that would make him more effing ridiculous than to have COVID-19 at this or any other point in time. There's no way he's going to allow anybody to mention that. If he dies, it would be his final order that tell people I was killed fighting ISIS, whatever. So, okay. So no, the White House is never going to say when the valet developed symptoms. They might be pressed, give us a date, and they'll say Wednesday, and then something about the story timeline won't add up, and it'll be true. It's only logically possible that this, and this thing that happened could have happened if the real answer was Tuesday or earlier, and they'll deny it, back and forth, and eventually the truth will come out, and they'll say fake news and whatever. After learning what one of his valets was infected, Trump became, quote, lava level mad. And I assume that means you get red in the face, but he's already orange. I don't know. So maybe that's what, and somebody did cleverly comment on Twitter that lava level. Maybe that's the orange. We've been misunderstanding it the whole time. He's filled with lava. Anyway, he became lava level mad at his staff. This is really interesting. And said he doesn't feel his staff, the White House staff. This is amazing. Trump became lava level mad at his White House staff and said he doesn't feel the White House is doing all it can to protect him, according to a person close to the White House. And welcome to America, a-hole. The White House is not doing all it can to protect any of us. And guess what? You're just another human being, and you're going to have to suffer with the consequences. P.S. About 75% chance that a large portion of the White House staff, like me, can't wait for him to get coronavirus and die. I don't know whether they're as mean as I am, but I'm pretty sure they'd rather serve Mike Pence. They probably hate Mike Pence too, but at least he keeps his mouth shut. Anyway, maybe that would change as president. The source said the unknowingly infected valet was, I don't know, could he have done it on purpose? I hope so. Anyway, he was unknowingly infected, and he was consistently close to the president throughout the day. Now, here's how you know that that's true. You wonder, how close does a valet get? Well, Diet Coke, okay, that's pretty close, right? You'd have to figure he'd be close to him, right? How do you know that he was really close to him? The next sentence. Trump publicly disputed that Thursday, telling reporters that he'd had very little personal contact with this gentleman. Very little, of course. He's the valet. There's no way in the world, I don't know what kind of services the valet actually provides, true. But the description here, there's no way he went a day without a Diet Coke being brought to him. He brings him his meals. Very little contact. He's a little person, so he doesn't notice him, but that's how you know that there was enough contact to be worried. Trump says there wasn't. The president that the president that the White House, I think probably means says, the president something, that the White House would be increasing testing from weekly to daily. So there's your answer. They may have to, I don't know what day of the week they test the guys. Monday? Sunday? I don't know. So it could be up to a week since he was tested, and I don't know how quickly the results come back, yada, yada. They may not all get the rapid results tests. President says, I gather, that the White House would be increasing testing from weekly to daily, but added that testing is not a perfect art. That's true. Trump also said he and Pence tested negative on Wednesday and Thursday. So, by the way, all the tests you can't have, they're wasting there now that the staff has got it. So, we test once a week. Now we're going to test once a day, he said during an Oval Office photo opportunity with Texas Governor Greg Abbott. But even when you test once a day, something happens where they catch something. And, of course, somebody could test negative when they're really positive, but I don't know. The CDC recommends that people who recently had close contact with a person with COVID-19, as Trump has just had, should stay home for 14 days since the last exposure, check their temperatures twice a day, and stay away from people who are at high risk of getting seriously ill. The White House hasn't indicated whether Trump will follow those guidelines. Answer, he won't. We already got the answer on the mask, so the answer for this is, I'm not doing anything that inconveniences me, and we already know he's headed to Camp David to give the staff their COVID-19 on Saturday. Staffers who came into close contact with the president have said they are tested regularly, but few aides have been seen wearing masks around the West Wing, including when Trump traveled recently to Phoenix, where he said he wore a mask for only a brief period of time. I don't even remember that. Everyone entering the White House grounds has their temperatures checked. And as you know, Trump insists that it be done rectally, in case you were wondering about that. There is generally a bit of lag between the time a person is infected and a positive test result, said Kelly Robleski, Director of Infectious Diseases at the Association of Public Health Laboratories. In March, a staffer for Pence who worked in the adjacent Eisenhower Executive Office building tested positive, but officials said neither the president nor the vice president had come into contact with the aide. The president himself had brief contact with several Brazilian officials in March at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, who later tested positive. The valet is a member of the Navy, said a person familiar with the situation. The Navy regularly details personnel to work at the White House in a variety of positions to take care of the president's daily needs, like serving meals, bringing him beverages throughout the day, and ensuring that his clothes are ironed and his shoes are shined. That is a great thing to do with your military career. I mean, it's probably a big honor and all that stuff when there's a normal president, but instead you have this guy. And I thought it was Hope Hicks's job to steam his pants, but now it's now you can enter the military and have that as part of your career. All right. Well, anyway, I think that catches us up with what stupid things the president himself is doing at the moment. I can read you a little bit about what's going on with Mike Flynn. An AP story here will catch us up on part of it. Anyway, Trump praises Barr, that's the Attorney General, for dropping Flynn's Trump-Russia case, by Michael Balsamo and Eric Tucker. This piece tells us, in an abrupt about-face, the Justice Department said it is dropping the criminal case against Trump's first national security advisor, Mike Flynn, abandoning a prosecution that has become a rallying cry for the president and his supporters in attacking the FBI's Trump-Russia investigation. The action Thursday was a stunning reversal for one of the signature cases brought by special counsel Robert Mueller. It comes even though prosecutors for the past 3 years have maintained that Flynn lied to the FBI in a January 2017 interview about his conversations with the Russian ambassador. That's the heart of the problem here in this situation is the Department of Justice is dropping the charges of lying to the Department of Justice. You see? So it's a bit of a slap in the face for the FBI, but Trump hates the FBI because the FBI could, catch him and put him in jail. So we're angry at them for that. Flynn admitted as much, right? He, of course, pled guilty before later asking to withdraw the plea, and he became a key cooperator for Mueller as the special counsel investigated ties between Russia and Trump's 2016 political campaign. Thursday's action was swiftly embraced by Trump, who has relentlessly tweeted about the outrageous case, and last week pronounced Flynn exonerated and is likely to energize supporters of the president who have taken up the retired Army Lieutenant General as a cause. Trump praised Attorney General William Barr for abandoning the prosecution of Flynn. Bill Barr, blah, blah, blah. He says lots of great things about him on Fox and Friends. Trump said that if Barr had been his first Attorney General, there would never have been a Russia probe, and that's probably true. He would have stopped it immediately, which would have been illegal and impeachable. But as you know, we don't have enough votes to make that stick, so what does he care? Democrats, however, have complained that Barr is excessively loyal to the president. Attorney General Barr's politicization of justice knows no bounds, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said. There were some people who told you this was going to happen again after George W. Bush did it, but those people are idiots. She accused Barr's department of dropping the case to continue to cover up for the president, which is true. Shortly before the filing was submitted, Brandon Van Grack, a Mueller team member and veteran prosecutor on the case, withdrew from the prosecution, a possible sign of disagreement with the decision. It is. After the Flynn announcement, Trump declared that his former aide had been, quote, an innocent man all along. Now, never mind, people were retweeting Trump's tweet saying he had to fire Flynn because he was dishonest with him and lied to the FBI and to Mike Pence. But forget all that. Who cares? He lives in the moment. He accused Obama administration officials of targeting Flynn and said, because he was a spy. I mean, okay. But I hope that a big price is going to be paid. He's real into looking backwards. Going further, he said of the effort to investigate Flynn, it's treason. It's treason. It's not treason. The treason is his and Flynn's, but, projection, as always. In court documents filed Thursday, the Justice Department said that after reviewing newly disclosed information and other materials, it agreed with Flynn's lawyers that his interview with the FBI should never have taken place because his contacts with the Russian ambassador were, quote, entirely appropriate. That's what the Justice Department is saying officially now. The U.S. attorney, except for the people who worked on the case, they had to quit. The U.S. attorney reviewing the Flynn case, Jeff Jensen, formally recommended dropping it to Barr last week, the course of action publicly recommended by Trump, who appointed Barr to head the Justice Department. It's weird that he got what he wanted out of that. Barr has increasingly challenged the federal Trump-Russia investigation, saying in an interview last month that it was started, quote, without any basis. In February, he overruled a decision by prosecutors in the case of Roger Stone, a longtime Trump friend and advisor, in favor of a more lenient recommended sentence. Jensen said in a statement that he briefed Attorney General Barr on my findings, advised him on these conclusions, and he agreed. Yeah, he told me to do this, but I did it. What do you know? He agreed. The department's action comes amid an internal review into the handling of the case and an aggressive effort by Flynn's lawyers to challenge the basis for the prosecution. The lawyers cited newly disclosed FBI emails and notes last week to allege that Flynn was improperly trapped into lying when agents interviewed him days after Trump's inauguration. They asked him questions, he answered them. It's a huge trap. None of the documents appeared to undercut the central allegation that Flynn had misled the FBI. But, the point is that Trump and Barr said they did, and so the only conclusion that they could come to is that they meant it when they said it, so you're free to go. We were lying, but we did say it. In recent months, Flynn's attorneys have leveled allegations about the FBI's actions and asked to withdraw his guilty plea. A judge has rejected most of the claims and not ruled on others, including the bid to revoke the plea. So we may have that problem still looming. Earlier this year, Barr appointed Jensen, the top federal prosecutor in St. Louis, to investigate the handling of Flynn's case. As part of that process, the Justice Department gave Flynn's attorneys internal FBI correspondence, including one handwritten note from senior FBI officials that mapped out the internal deliberations about the purpose of the Flynn interview. What's our goal? Truth/admission, or get him to lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired. And that they feel is entrapment. But again, see what they're asking here. So what are we trying to get at here? Are we trying to get him to tell the truth about his involvement with Russia so we can prosecute him for that? Or are we trying to get him to lie to us so that we can prosecute him for lying to us if he denies contact with the Russians? But that's basically a description of the two things that could happen in the interview. We know he spoke to the Russians. He can either lie about it, in which case we're stuck with prosecuting him for lying to the FBI, or he can admit the truth, in which case we'll be able to prosecute him for the espionage that we actually suspect him of. There's nothing wrong with that memo. But of course, Trump, pretends or actually doesn't understand that. I don't know which one. Probably just doesn't understand it. But basically, he's inclined to see anything as looking negative here. Let's see. Other documents show the FBI had been prepared before its interview to drop its investigation into whether he was acting at the direction of Russia. Later that month, though, as the White House insisted that Flynn hadn't discussed sanctions with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, the FBI officials grew increasingly concerned by Flynn's conversations with the diplomat and kept the investigation open to question him about it. 2 agents visited him at the White House on January 24th, 2017. It took 4 days from inauguration to I think we got him. And I guess, I know that one document says that they were prepared to drop the investigation. And I think probably at that point they said, well, there's no way he's going to admit that he talked to the Russians about being a Russian spy, right? So the best we can do is if we can prove we know that he spoke to them improperly, he'll lie to us and we can prosecute him for lying. But do we really want to do that? It's not that it isn't illegal. It's that it feels like we should be nailing him for espionage and we're nailing him for lying about his espionage to cover it up. And I don't know if that's going to move people, but they said, lying to us is a crime. That's the point of having it on the books is, if you're not going to tell the truth, then you should go to jail for the lying instead of your admission if you can't be honest. That's not a setup either. Let's see. Thursday's filing signed by U.S. Attorney Tim Shea says the FBI had no basis to continue investigating Flynn after failing to find illegality. It says there was nothing on his Russia calls, quote, to indicate an inappropriate relationship between Mr. Flynn and a foreign power. Okay. The department also contends Flynn's answers during the interview were equivocal and indirect rather than false, and weren't relevant to the underlying investigation into whether the Trump campaign and Russia were illegally coordinating. The memo also cites what it describes as uncertainty within the FBI over whether Flynn had lied, noting that the agents who interviewed him reported that they had a very sure demeanor, and that then FBI Director James Comey had said it was a close call, but then he made the call. Oh well. Former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe lambasted the new action. He said the FBI was obligated to interview Flynn to better understand why he was talking to Russian officials. Flynn's lies, McCabe said, added to our concerns about his relationship with the Russian government. Yeah, it's not really all that difficult to understand. Okay, well, we'll leave it at that, even though there's another sentence or two. We'll return in just a minute and decide whether that's an important sentence after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Okay, so my assessment of that last sentence, not that important, but I did want to bring you some of the things that I saw people discussing on Twitter yesterday following the news of what the Justice Department was going to be doing with Flynn. Let's see, I got a couple of comments here. Ken Delanian from NBC pointing out one of the real difficult to understand items. Difficult to understand why anybody would think that, you could get away with this, I guess, is the issue. William Barr's Justice Department, but not the actual prosecutors on the case. The Justice Department stepped in, replaced the guys, they all quit, and they came in and said, what did they basically say? The bottom line is that they told a federal judge, who has to make a decision here, they told the federal judge that the Justice Department doesn't believe that it can prove a charge that Flynn has admitted to in open court. So that's what we're looking at here. Of course, he admitted to doing it. He entered a guilty plea. He wants to withdraw the guilty plea, et cetera, et cetera. But, that's always going to be a suspicious thing to do. But the Justice Department's position here, we're all going with it, the idea that it's a foregone conclusion. And it may be eventually. But there are a few steps that it's going to take to get there. Because what's actually happening now is he's made his confession. He wants to withdraw the confession. The judge has not approved the withdrawal of the confession at this point. And now the Justice Department says, we don't think we can prove that he did this thing that he admitted to. A judge could look at this and say, that doesn't make any sense. It's fairly obvious to me that the Justice Department is handling this as a political matter and not as a factual and legal matter. And I'm not going to allow him to reverse his plea. And your motion to drop the charges is denied. But I don't know where that goes because it may be. Let me read you another comment here. Andrew Laufer, who tweets as Laufer Law. Andrew C. Laufer Esquire, no less. More or less a random dude on Twitter, but with a tremendous following. So, civil rights attorney is how he describes himself. He had this comment regarding Barr's Flynn antics. The only person that can vacate the plea agreement, which is a court order, is Judge Emmett Sullivan. That's who's handling the case at this point. Let's calm down and see what Judge Sullivan does. Flynn's not out of the woods yet. I don't think you have to calm down to watch what Sullivan does. I don't like being told, of course, to calm down, especially in a situation like this. Flynn's a spy, and he deserves what he's gonna get. But he might not get it. That's the problem. I'm not gonna calm down about it. But it's a good point. Simultaneously a good point and a bad point, I guess. Another comment here from Kim Whaley, maybe? Wheely, I don't know how she pronounces it. It's Whehle. And Kim is the CBS News legal analyst who says, let's not forget Judge Sullivan's words about Michael Flynn. This is a very serious offense. Arguably, you sold your country out. Flynn is an unregistered agent of a foreign country while serving as the national security advisor to the President of the United States. You might remember it was Judge Sullivan who said and then eventually kind of had to withdraw his statement. But remember when they were dealing with his plea agreement the first time around, it was Sullivan that asked the prosecutors, how come you didn't charge him with espionage here? How come you didn't charge him with treason here? I mean, really. The charges, the facts seem to warrant it. So the idea that Sullivan would be pleased to simply say, well, what can I do? The Justice Department says they're dropping the charges. Now, that he may yet do that. He may still say, look, I don't want to overstep my bounds as a judge here. The prosecution, for better or for worse, we've entrusted the prosecution of this case to this administration. And we've handed over the keys to these guys. And these guys say, we're going to let him go. As much as I think they're faking it, my hands are tied. That is one thing that a judge could do. Another is, I'm going to I'm not going to allow him to withdraw the plea agreement. We're going to go ahead with the trial, to which, I guess at that point the Justice Department says, okay, but, pardon me. We'll go ahead with the trial, but we're not sending any prosecutors. Or the prosecutors that we send are going to say, this guy's great. He's awesome. We have no problem with him. And, let it go to the jury that way. There'll be the defense saying, he's awesome. He did nothing wrong. And a prosecution that says, he's awesome. He did nothing wrong. You can have that trial if you want, but you know what the jury is going to do. And if the jury says you're both wrong, he's guilty, and passes sentence, we'll appeal. And, eventually we're going to get to, we won't even let it get to that point before we appeal, but we could appeal at that point. Basically, if you refuse to accept the withdrawal of the plea agreement, we'll appeal that. And anyway, eventually that'll bring us to the D.C. Circuit. If we draw a bad panel of 3 judges and 2 of them say, no, just like Sullivan, I'm not going to allow the wool to be pulled over the court's eyes here, and we lose, we'll ask for a rehearing en banc, although maybe we'll skip that part because honestly, I don't think they'll do any better if a regular panel upholds the trial judge's refusal to accept the plea withdrawal. I don't think they're going to change that. But then we'll bring it to the Supreme Court, and we'll do it on an emergency basis like we do with everything else, and we'll count on having 5 people on our side that make it work. Or at the very least, we stretch this out past November, and we're able to forget about it for now. And Flynn doesn't go to jail up until that point. And ultimately, if it doesn't look like it's going to work out and I lose the election, there's still time between November and January 20th, 2021 to just pardon Flynn at that point. So, it may very well be a foregone conclusion. We're all just wrong about how things work, and we have to wait for the ultimate exercise of lawlessness on behalf of Flynn by the Trump administration. So we'll see what stages they want to take it to. And how long the whole thing lasts, or whether Judge Sullivan says, I'll eventually be overturned on this for, fairly or unfairly. So what am I going to do? Maybe I'll just extricate myself from this from now. Okay. Let's see. What other things do we want to learn about? As I think done with Flynn. Can we make mention here? Do I want to point to Reason magazine as the source for this? Probably not really want to, but it's one of those interesting situations where the pseudo-libertarian right says rotten things about a right-wing lunatic. So that's kind of special. Maybe you want to. We'll bring up the underlying facts anyway. We'll start with the fact that Jacob Wohl is still alive and not in jail, and we're really not sure why that's the case. Neither of those two things should be true, and he's another one of the guys that could fall in a sausage grinder, and it would be okay with me. Like in Russia, they fall out windows all the time. I don't know. It could happen anywhere. Here's the deal. He too is an a-hole. Jacob Wohl and Jack Berkman are the weird team. I think Jack Berkman is considerably older than Jacob Wohl, and I have some questions about the nature of their relationship, but some of that I guess is going to be private. Certainly the Reason people would encourage me to leave it that way. Anyway, these two guys are the Republican hoaxsters who have only one play, and that is they keep announcing that they have a super secret intelligence agency that they run, and that it has discovered evidence of sexual misconduct by somebody that Republicans hate for whatever reason, whoever is the flavor of the day. We hate that guy or woman. And so what their actual job is, apparently, and I don't know who pays them for this, is they get some money together and they hire a person of the opposite gender from the person they're targeting to announce at their direction that this famous person that Republicans hate has committed some sort of sexual misconduct against this person that they've hired to do this thing. And then they say, we're having a press conference to release all our evidence. And then repeatedly, they have the press conference in Jack Berkman's townhouse driveway. And I'm not really sure why this continues to work, but you may remember these guys some time ago when Robert Mueller was the most hated person. They hired a woman to say, Robert Mueller sexually assaulted me. And, the whole thing fell apart because, of course, they said, well, what's your evidence that this happened? Well, we have this super secret intelligence agency that we hired, private investigators who told us. And then, remember, all the reporters got all the information and they were like, that's weird. The phone number for your private investigation agency. First of all, no one ever answers. There's just an answering machine on the other end. And when we looked up who owns that phone number and where it came from, it's Jacob Wohl's mom. So, problematic. And then when we go to the website for your agency, all the people who are there in the profiles, About Us page, all of them are stock photos taken from elsewhere on the internet. And that's weird. So, we kind of know that you're liars, but they continue to do this. Having been found out about in their attempt to frame Robert Mueller, they, again, didn't go to jail. Nobody stabbed them or threw them out any windows or anything. Very great disappointment to me. And in a few months, I think, later, they came back with the surprise news that they were having another press conference that another super secret private detective agency that also had a phone number that belonged to Jacob Wohl's mom had found a young man who had been sexually assaulted by Elizabeth Warren, because Elizabeth Warren was at that point, it looked like she was in the middle of her surge and it looked like she might end up as the front runner and win the Democratic nomination. So they had to have a sexual assault charge to level against her. And they did it exactly the same way, and it had exactly the same effect. But I'm sure like Jacob Wohl and Jack Berkman are walking around saying, why do you think that Elizabeth Warren isn't the nominee right now? Because the thing we did in your driveway, that's why. Well, now I guess for some reason they're not sure who to hate. But I guess last week, all the Republican idiots, like the worst ones in the world, like Jacob Wohl, thought that Dr. Fauci should be the target of the next one. So here's the big news. They hired a woman to say that Anthony Fauci, you're never going to believe this. What do you think they charged him with? That's right, that he sexually assaulted her. But this one fell apart faster than usual. So Reason has got this report. We'll read Nancy Rommelman's report about that. She said, not Nancy, but the woman in the story, she said Anthony Fauci sexually assaulted her. Now she says Jacob Wohl and Jack Berkman paid her to lie. Oh, well. After failing to frame Robert Mueller, Elizabeth Warren, and others, I don't even know who else, for sexual misconduct, the infamous Trumpster hoaxsters tried to go after Fauci, but the woman they hired to play the victim had second thoughts. I wish she had had a third thought and murdered the two of them. But, it's probably best for her that she not do that. Let's see. So Nancy says, I just finished Saturday morning's second cup of coffee when an email popped through, subject line, exposing Jacob Wohl and Jack Berkman. All right. Hi, Nancy. I hope you're having a nice weekend. I feel very bad about lying to you and others about Dr. Fauci. I took it upon myself to call Jacob Wohl and Jack Berkman and record them. See attached. Sounds fun. Many thanks. And again, I feel very bad about all this. I apologize to you, the other reporters, and Dr. Fauci. How do you get to the point where you agree to do it? I don't know. Anyway, maybe it will reveal that in here. The writer of the email identified herself as Diana Andrade. I don't know whether she pronounces Andrade, Andrade. I had never before emailed with Andrade, but had spoken with her 10 days earlier when I knew her as Diana Rodriguez. Aha. So, fake name, and what better way to fake a name than to pretend you are an ethnic minority? Rodriguez. Okay, maybe she is. Who knows? At that time, Rodriguez alleged that when she was 20 years old, which I think was yesterday. Oh, it's 2014. So she is 24. Very young looking. In 2014, she'd been sexually assaulted by Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and one of the most visible faces in the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't know where you go in 2014 as a 20-year-old to meet Anthony Fauci. I'd be curious about the story. For those lucky enough to be unfamiliar with the exploits of Wohl and Berkman, they are pro-Trump provocateurs who found a niche drumming up fake sexual harassment allegations that end comically badly, including those against former FBI Director Robert Mueller, who turned out to have been serving jury duty the day he was supposed to have committed the assault. Another one of those great detective pieces where they actually check your record of where were you, like we're finding out with the story of Joe Biden and the gridiron dinner in Delaware, right? Anyway. Also here, of course, Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren, the press conference for which took place on Berkman's stoop and whose supposed victim was a 24-year-old Marine. Remember that one? Actually, everybody was like, go Elizabeth Warren. Nice job. Being on the receiving end of an allegation of sexual misconduct is now a rite of political passage. A perverse sign you've made it. Fauci's star rose in March as he appeared at COVID-19 briefings day after day, outshining President Donald Trump and occasionally knocking the president's pronouncements out of the headlines. Here, then, was an opportunity for Wohl and Berkman to take down the newest of Trump's perceived enemies, which is an amazing thing to think, to maybe become favorites in Trump's actual orbit. On the chance it could cause their own star to rise, they would move Fauci toward irrelevancy, if not infamy, and thereby kill, many thousands of people, but whatever. The rollout of their latest smear job was a fiasco, a series of media alerts announcing press conferences with no start times, never mind that neither the public relations contact nor the company she worked for appeared to exist, and a, quote, statement from Rodriguez so breathless it seemed intended to steam up the windows. Not for nothing, Sally Quinn recently confessed she based a thinly veiled DC heartthrob in her 1991 bestseller Happy Endings on Fauci. Wow. So Wohl and Berkman aren't the first to write this particular fan fiction. Except, sexual assault is not really a fan thing. But all right, whatever. He looked rich and powerful, and I love smart men with gray hair. He told me all about his fantastic career in medicine, so I went upstairs, Rodriguez wrote of her fictional meeting with Fauci at the bar of the Four Seasons Hotel in Washington, D.C. After detailing some ineffective hotel bed wrestling and managing to flee with her honor intact, Rodriguez closed with the statement, "Now, when I see him on TV, touted as some kind of hero, I want the nation to know the truth. This is my truth. This is my story." It was all in a league of its own weirdness, a collusion of Harlequin romance and #MeToo. Nevertheless, several journalists called into a conference call to hear Rodriguez's story. It's amazing. We were treated instead to Wohl and Berkman on the line, stating that they'd been on the fly invited to represent Rodriguez, who haltingly told a story that varied significantly from the media alert, and when questioned for clarification, was talked over by Wohl. People come forward against figures that are considered media darlings with very credible allegations and are attacked by the media, he told us, and you see the same sort of victim blaming here. He and Berkman then tried to dissemble past there not being one verifiable fact or person in their latest confession, implausibly invoked the name of Kevin Spacey as someone who would speak for their client, and confirmed for reporters that the original location of the press conference had been the Chinese embassy. They were kind enough to offer the venue, and there's not a lot of open venues these days, said Berkman during the call. He had a, quote, contact there. It was all beyond absurd, and when the reporters finally stopped laughing, one asked, "Can you just tell us you're pulling a prank here?" With the exception of the Daily Dot, which covered the claim only to debunk it, no outlet touched the story. There was no there, and while it might have been instructive to show readers how the rancid sausage is made, did we want to give these charlatans more sunshine, especially in light of Fauci leading the battle against a deadly pandemic? And that would have been that, until Saturday's email. Well, so I guess well handled, I suppose, except for the debate about whether or not to expose them. But anyway, I guess Saturday's email changed that, which included Andrade telling me, "The reality is that I've known Jacob since 2018 and that he charmed me into taking money to do this." See attached picture of us together, taken when they were romantically involved. Ugh. Also, that Wohl and Berkman had me do something like this back in January. Is that interesting? Okay. And here's another picture. Jacob Wohl taking a picture of himself with Andrade sitting on his lap and, I don't know, taking a picture in a mirror here. So whatever. Fantastic. And I understand they're trying to get another girl to do it too, she writes. They asked me if I knew anyone to do it. Andrade was correct. The day before, I'd received another press release, this time from Berkman, citing a new accusation by someone known as Karen Draper, a supposedly former assistant of Fauci, a person and claim almost certainly as vaporous as the last. Why did they keep trying the same scam when they were clearly so bad at it? That is the only interesting angle of the story. They are interested in one thing, power, Andrade writes. Sure, but how could such buffoonery be perceived as power? Were they so desperate to catch Trump's eye they would pounce on anyone garnering public attention, something the president was temperamentally unable to abide? And was there any upside to the rest of us knowing what animates a couple of amateur dirty tricksters, wannabe Roger Stones minus the charisma and connections? Andrade, having been in the muck with these two, thought people should know. She had not acted nobly and had taken money for not acting nobly to try to bring down a man she had never met. Disgust with the enterprise made her want Wohl and Berkman to admit what they'd put her up to. The deciding factor to get them on tape, however, was Wohl asking her to provide another girl. I ignored his inquiry about this, she writes, but it led me to feel like I needed to blow the whistle. During the 9-minute, 35-second call, Wohl and Berkman do not cover themselves in glory. They hector Andrade when she says she's feeling paranoid and wants reassurance that everything's fine. What could be wrong, Diana? Wall asks. You did a good job. You got paid. What's the problem? What seems to be the issue? You're freaking out. You're texting me late at night. What's the issue? What's the problem? What's your problem? Echoes Berkman. Tell me what the problem is. What's your problem? They seem to like to ask that question. She says, it's all a lie and I hate your guts. But no, she says she's uncomfortable with the money they gave her. Some guy showing up claiming to be a lawyer with his face hidden by a cap or even a mask. Is he even a real lawyer? She asks. I looked him up. That wouldn't make much of a difference. Yeah, he's a real lawyer. Wall says he's a good lawyer. That answers the question. And then he goes on to brag about the lawyer's White House connections. It's possible that a White House connected lawyer might have hand-delivered 5 figures in cash to Andrade in Los Angeles. It's also possible Wall made up the whole thing. But she says she did get the money, and Wall and Berkman are clearly eager to imply that they are intimate with Team Trump. The cloak and daggers might have been discomfiting, but ultimately were a distraction from what Andrade wanted on tape. She proposes she give back the cash and instead receive a wire transfer, thus creating a trace, a proposition Berkman shoots down. Cash is best, he tells her. We don't want any records of this nonsense. That's a good catch. She wants the men to admit they are trying to bring down a person who in no part deserves it. Let me tell you something, Diana, says Berkman. This guy shut the country down. He put 40 million people out of work. In a situation like that, you have to make up whatever you have to make up to stop that train, and that's the way life works, okay? That's the way it goes. Well, I'm glad we're at least getting the... now I understand kind of what they're doing, what their motivation is. They're wrong, but at least I get it. I was wondering where they even came from on this one. Andrade counters that he and Wall are not taking COVID-19 seriously. It's not just any virus. I mean, it's a huge deal. I think you guys think it's something made up, and it's not. Mother Nature has to clean the barn every so often, Berkman counters. Oh, these guys should catch it, for sure. How real is it? Who knows? So what if 1% of the population goes? Well, so what if Berkman goes? So what if he falls on a pitchfork? I don't know. Could happen. So what if you lose 400,000 people? 200,000 were elderly. The other 200,000 are the bottom of society. You've got to clean out the barn. If it's real, if it's a positive thing. Oh, I'm sorry. If it's real, it's a positive thing, for God's sake. Okay. I mean, I don't even know how you survive as a human being like that. But like I said, if they fell into a pit of alligators or, a box of knives, that'd be cool. So what? Survival of the fittest. And I'm sorry. This is Andrade. So what? For survival of the fittest? Andrade asks, a bit more pique in her voice. The sense you are dealing with people who have an enthusiasm for eugenics can do that. But Wall's not having it. Diana, look, can you just do this for me? He says, can you just keep your mouth shut and just do it for me? Oh, Jacob, come on, she says. You have a way of charming people, and there are a lot of things I don't want to say in front of Jack, but I am so done with you. I do not want to deal with this anymore. I think you're actually an evil person. You're just so charming until you get me cornered. I don't know how you do it. We don't know how Hope Hicks does it, but we don't know how you do it, but you find a way to make me go along with your little plans. At this, the men talk over each other, telling Andrade she readily volunteered and asking who cares if she made up a story. Grow up, for Christ's sake. And those harassing phone calls she's starting to get since the conference call, probably telemarketers, Wall tells her. Shortly afterward, Andrade ends the call. Then she emails me. I'm sure you noticed I wasn't following the script, she says, after our first email, with regard to the story told on the conference call not lining up with the press statement. Yes, I say, it was pretty bad. There was no preparation, she says. Jacob just told me because he knows my other story. He just said, use the same stuff. The same stuff is a reference to a sexual assault Andrade said she did experience when she was just out of high school, when she was attacked in a car by a much older man. The incident caused her shame, both having been assaulted by someone she barely knew but thought she could trust, and also because I lied to my mom about where I was when this happened. For many reasons, I couldn't talk about it, she said. That's too bad. This is a bad part. But she had told Wall back when they were involved, It made him angry on her behalf, and this past January, he made her an offer. And I guess I wonder if some sick way he thought, I can get you closure on that by faking up another story. I don't know if he thinks that much, but it would have been a bad idea even if he had. All right, well, let's see. He said, well, you don't want to talk about this, but maybe this could be another way of talking about it. He then asked her to recraft her experience into an accusation against an Academy Award-winning actor. He, Wool, would pay her to do it. So, I don't know. I'll see if we can find out after this. You can get up off the edge of your seat and find out whether we find out which Academy Award-winning actor this is supposed to be, and I wonder if it's Kevin Spacey since they mentioned him earlier. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think this is going on a little bit longer than I thought, but I am a little fascinated to find out what is happening in the minds of Jacob Wool and Jack Berkman. Is that right? Do I have that? I've already forgotten the guy's. Yeah, Berkman. I don't know why exactly. It's not like important to the country, but I don't know. It feels like this way, if we find out what scumbags they really are, than if they were killed in an avalanche. No one will feel bad about it. So I don't want to trouble you, psychically over the weekend. If anything were to happen to these guys, that you had evil thoughts about them, you'd be justified in doing so. I don't know. Somehow this is fascinating, and it's certainly it's almost a nice diversion from the idiocy and insanity of the president. Except that they all work together and they're on the same page, and it's bad news, and it's sad that the world is like this. But again, if there were a biblical flood and they all died, then you would feel okay about it. And it's important to me to your mental health. It's working for me. I don't know. Anyway, sometimes this is fascinating. Do we find out who the Academy Award-winning actor is? Let's move on and find out. All right, remember, this was something discussed, I guess, back in January. Remember, you were all set to say that some Academy Award-winning actor sexually assaulted you as a method. This is an interesting idea. I don't get the charm and the persuasiveness of Jacob Wool. I mean, I guess I get the charm. I mean, absent the fact that he's an evil idiot, I mean, I guess he's a good-looking kid, and, he can talk girls into doing this stuff. As I'm sure he talks them into doing all sorts of things all the time. It's bad news, and he's a predator, and he needs to be stopped, but I guess that's what's happening. So he talked her into the idea of, well, you were actually sexually assaulted. So rather than, like the right idea would be, you should see a therapist and talk to them about what happened and get over it that way. Instead, he says, how about if you pretend that your attacker was this guy, and then you can, talk through the actual assault, but pretend it was somebody else, and I'll pay you, to pretend it was them because I need to frame them for political reasons. That part, I mean, I guess you're just not really thinking clearly about things, and she likes this guy, and, the babble that he speaks sounds like a good idea at the time because she's infatuated with him, and so she goes ahead with it. That's the basic story. So let's see. He said, that would be Jacob, we actually need someone like this, and maybe it's good practice for you to be able to talk about this, she recalls. Just talk about how you feel about the real thing, but take it out against this other person. Wow. Man, Andrea made the accusation. She never knew why Wool wanted her to do this, and the story never gained traction. Wool then had her try again with Fauci. another strikeout. Why she agrees, again, I don't know, but whatever. And I guess we don't find out who the strikeout was against. But maybe if you were following the story of Jacob Wohl, and what he was up to somehow on your own, if you know, send it to us. Put the KITM hashtag on it. I'll blurt out the name. That'd be interesting to know. I don't know whether it's Googleable or not. As feeble as they are at pulling off these cons, Wohl and Berkman appear to appreciate what a powerful motivator shame can be, and how it has been used traditionally to keep women quiet. They have refashioned Believe All Women into a tool for their own purposes, including in their most recent media alert about the press conference called for this Friday for alleged Fauci victim Karen Draper. That's the new scam they're hoping to pull. And I guess this is also of some interest to people who are following other sexual harassment allegations. And I don't know whether the parallel is applicable. I like to think that the people who are playing a supporting role in the Tara Reade story are not all both sides analogs to Jacob Wohl and Jack Berkman. I'd like to think that they're uniquely terrible, these Berkman and Wohl. And I know at least a few of the people who have involved themselves very deeply for whatever reason in the Tara Reade accusations. And I think, wow, that would be terrible news if they really were just a flip side analog. Although, who knows how flip the side really is, given that, the likely outcome of the success of either one of these plots would be to reelect Donald Trump somehow. I guess that's what they're aiming for. Although, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that the people promoting the Tara Reade story would admit to wanting that. They may be wrong about what they're trying to do or what the actual effects are, but I don't think that they think they're trying to help Trump. But okay. Anyway, that's about as much as needs to be said about the parallels there. Okay, so let's continue on. There's a little bit more here. This is becoming a disturbing pattern, yeah, and the left-wing media has no interest in letting women speak their truth. Berkman wrote in the press release. You see how he's trying to, co-opt this thing. I'm hopeful that Karen, and it's hilarious that they chose that as the name, will be able to tell her story and help bring this troubling series of events to light. I don't know how they do all these things and why they do all these things, Andrade says. Also, he tried to frame Mueller. I'm like, how is he not in jail? It's a good question. I'd like to ask it too. The answer is, I'm not certain exactly what the crime is here, but not that I wouldn't want to see him in jail anyway. I mean, they certainly can come up with some sort of fraud thing. I say, well, how is he not being, plowed under is my question. By the way, I mean, I guess he's just not that important. Maybe that's the thing to say. I wonder if that would be the ultimate thing you could use to break Jacob Wohl. I don't think anything can break that guy's confidence in himself, but I guess you could say, I'm guessing you're the kind of guy who believes, for instance, in the Seth Rich conspiracy theory, that Seth Rich was murdered by Hillary Clinton operatives because he was spilling DNC internal secrets. How does it make you feel to know that operatives like that are out there and that you haven't been disappeared yet? You know what I mean? Like, if you were actually effective at what you were doing, you would have been, buried in the Meadowlands somewhere by now. But you're not, because no one even notices what you're doing, so you should just give up. I wonder if that would work with him. Anyway, Andrade says, I don't know why they do these things. How come he's not in jail? Reached by email for this story, Wohl responded no comment, and Berkman replied only, we stand by Diana and her allegations, although her allegations are now against you. I don't think he means those allegations. Even Andrade herself has been vague on some details of her own biography, adding another layer of obfuscation and mystery to an already fantastical narrative. I asked Andrade if she'd ever considered that Wohl might blackmail her by exposing the assault she experienced. She says she does not think he will, not now anyway, and that despite what he'd roped her into, she still wishes good things for Jacob. Oh, that's too bad. But there was one thing she did wonder, in light of his attempts to bring down Mueller and Fauci. I don't understand, she says, how he doesn't get in trouble. That's a good question. Maybe it was the non-committal murmurs Andrade had started to make, But a little more than 7 minutes into the taped call, something seemed to occur to Wool. "You haven't talked to anybody, have you?" he asked. Says Andrade. No one, Diana," he said. "I think it's the weekend. You're bored. You're bored. You're worked up. Can you sit on this for the weekend? Don't talk to anybody about this. Not your parents, not anyone, and it'll be fine." That's nice psychological advice for her, by the way. "I'm just trying to help you work through this. Don't tell your parents." One of her major problems is that she's upset that she didn't tell her parents. He advises her to do again. Yeah, he's a very abusive guy. "And is Dr. Fauci fine?" she asked. "I mean, is everything going to be fine with him? With adversaries as chaotic and inept as Wool and Berkman, the answer seems to be yes." Okay, let's see. There's a correction down at the bottom here with an asterisk, but I forget what the asterisk was about. It's way up here, but maybe just reading the correction will remind us. Correction. The original version of the story said that Senator Elizabeth Warren, yes, Elizabeth Warren's accuser didn't show up for the press conference. The man did show up and immediately removed his shirt to display scars he claimed to have received from an alleged vigorous flogging by Warren. The video is absolutely incredible and linked herein. Yes, so this 24-year-old Marine didn't have scars from combat. It was scars from rough sex with Elizabeth Warren. And I think that made everybody very happy about Elizabeth Warren at the time, as I recall. Okay, so I know it sort of feels like maybe this was an enormous waste of time, but I just, to me, they're somewhat fascinating, and it's infuriating on a number of levels, not the least of which is that this child of privilege is running around and getting girls that he's dating to do this dirty work for him, and it's very sad for the women involved. And what can I tell you? I hope they straighten out their lives. Not Wool and Berkman. I hope their lives end quickly and soon. And I'll grant them that mercy. Yeah, sure. I hope the end is quick for them. Why? Do we really need to torture these guys? I don't think so. Fall off a cliff and be done with it. All right. Let's see. A few other interesting things worth mentioning here. Did see a note from Scott Gottlieb, MD, just yesterday that I thought was interesting, given the decision by the CDC, the decision by the Trump administration to prohibit the CDC from publishing their guidelines on reopening. He points out here the irony around CDC not issuing its reopen guidance, whatever the reason, is a lot of businesses literally can't reopen without it, because CDC is a de facto regulator in a public health crisis. CDC must publish its umbrella document to publish more detailed industry-specific guidance. So there's a lot going on in this statement, and I don't know whether he follows it up with any other ones, and maybe we can scan his timeline to see. But like I said, there's a lot going on here. What's going on? One, because CDC has traditionally always been the go-to source for the best information on situations like this, public health situations, where there's a pandemic or a potential pandemic or whatever, because it's always been reliable, and because so much of our system is designed with the idea in mind that those things which have been reliable will always remain reliable, because no one can foresee an insane idiot president who either is doing things because he's working for the Russians and or just doesn't care about anything or doesn't understand how government works and just thinks I'm rich and nothing bad is ever going to happen to me. Because nobody factors that in, a lot of times businesses, large businesses in particular, where they have, written policies and manuals and corporate bylaws, et cetera, but also states and localities, when they write their statutes and ordinances, will do the same thing that businesses will do with their bylaws, which is to say, look, our policy with respect to reopening after a pandemic. Yes, there are businesses that actually have written disaster policies. for a long time, I'm sure that there weren't, but I think probably starting with like the Y2K bug, you started to see large corporations, even before then, really honestly, particularly for operations that have a lot going on in, say, in California, where they're frequently subject to earthquakes, wildfire, pillars of fire, raining blood, moraine, what have you. You have corporate policies, when we're responsible for large numbers of people and large corporate campuses, etc. Any number of disasters will eventually prompt you to have to hire a disaster consultant, essentially, and put together an emergency procedures manual. If there's an earthquake, what do we do? How do we evacuate? You got an evacuation plan just for the safety of the people at your physical facility, but also, how do we continue operations? There's a business consideration in all this. What do we do if there's, so the disaster consultants who help you with these things will tell you, okay, you're prompted to do this because of the disruption of your business by an earthquake, but you should be aware of other natural disasters. But generally, here's what to do in case of natural disaster. Follow these instructions. If, fire, earthquake, flood, etc. Name your basic disasters that could happen anywhere, even if they're far-fetched. I don't know if they go as far-fetched as saying, well, you saw the movie just recently where there was a volcano in Los Angeles. Let's do volcano policy. It doesn't have to be that specific. Natural disaster policy. First and foremost, how to evacuate the building. What are the plans for doing that? Make sure that there's, first aid kits on hand and an alert system and, who's responsible for calling emergency responders, et cetera, all that kind of stuff gets planned out. Among those plans will be a pandemic response. It'll show up in the report that you buy from the consultant. And if you're thumbing through it, I'm sure at some point somebody said, pandemic, what even is that? Oh, that would be like an epidemic, like a flu outbreak, Spanish flu kind of thing. Oh, yeah, okay. Probably thought it would never come up. Anyway, point is that in manuals like that, both for businesses and for states and localities, written into it is, how do the disaster consultants fill out their product? Well, here's what you do. How come you're such a genius in knowing what to do in a situation dealing with a pandemic that nobody has dealt with for 100 years? Well, the answer is because, page 25, what to do in a case of pandemic, says follow CDC guidelines about what to do. Make them your guide star. And that will help you avoid liability. That's a chief concern. That's why your boss asked you to take on this project, is to keep operations going, yes, but avoid liability as well. How do you avoid it in the case of a pandemic, a public health crisis? Follow CDC procedure, because no president would ever order the CDC to give you bad advice on purpose or muzzle the CDC from giving you good advice, because then millions, thousands, possibly millions of Americans would needlessly die, and that would be taken out on the president, and he would lose his reelection. There's no way a CDC would do that. So, in corporate guidelines and policies all over America, there's follow CDC guidance on how to deal with this. In statutes all across America, very much like I think we discussed many years ago, longtime listeners, maybe this will give you an inkling of when states wrote up their statutes about how they would deal with concealed carry permits for guns in their states. They said, well, in order to get one, you got to go through training. What kind of training? Too specific for me. We're going to outsource this. And the default answer was, you got to have a training of at least X number of hours. They probably had a hearing and they had a trainer come in and say it got to be 8 hours of training. All right. 8 hours of training by an NRA certified instructor. They outsourced what is it that you need to know in order to be able to enjoy this state policy of concealed carry. And the answer is you gotta be NRA certified. Now, at the time they wrote the policy, in all likelihood, it was still back in the days when the NRA was, they're the gun safety guys. It's morphed since then, although sometimes when you're talking about concealed carry, that's a more recent thing. The NRA may have morphed, but it didn't matter, because there it was Republican legislators trying to steer power, influence, and money to the NRA. Very understandable. So it would be in the NRA's hands to decide what do you have to do in order to get a concealed carry permit in this state? Similarly, states and localities have written into their policies and statutes and ordinances, we will be guided by the CDC. If there's a pandemic that breaks out across the country, presumably the CDC will be guiding the whole country. If it's localized for some reason, it's an Ebola thing, and somebody has entered through John F. Kennedy Airport or, I don't know, Miami International Airport, and Florida needs to deal with it. The ordinances in Miami and the statutes in Florida say follow CDC guidelines. And what do you do when you're hidebound like that and the rule book you have says you have to follow CDC guidance, but CDC won't issue the guidance? That's what Scott's getting at here. In addition to which, he adds at the end, CDC must publish its umbrella document in order to publish more detailed industry-specific guidance. That's true too, but that is, again, assuming that CDC went ahead and worked on industry-specific guidance. They may have been blocked from doing that from the beginning. And so there's nothing to publish. But, it may also be that they have lots to say about industry-specific guidance. Everybody wants their tattoo parlors to open up. What is the industry-specific guidance on body art studios? As they now call them. That's the new thing. That's how they want to identify. You have to respect that. And, how can they open safely? Well, we have guidance on that, but it only can happen once we publish the umbrella document on general reopening policy. That's our guidelines. That's our process. If that's not happening, none of the rest of it can either. And as industries reopen, and here in Virginia at 2:00, I got to watch Ralph Northam clarify how we're going to reopen, but it won't be guided by the CDC. And I don't know whether Virginia has any statutes that require it be guided by the CDC, but if so, it's something we're going to have to either change statutorily, which I guess we can do with normal people more or less in control of the state legislature, or perhaps by executive order. I don't know. But a lot of states are going to have to iron that out, and that's an important point. Something to think about over the weekend, I guess, although hopefully someone else will be taking care of this stuff. All right, what other things do I need to shoehorn in here before we cut out for the weekend? One would be my desire to run this show 24/7, except for the fact that I like to go elsewhere and eat. There's so many things, so many stories I want to discuss with you. Let's see. Oh, yes. I mentioned that there was this issue with the other drug that they had found relatively effective, and I think I really have to see it written in front of me in order to say it right, but I can't. I'm scanning and I don't say remdesivir. Is that remdesivir. Axios has this scoop for you. I'll give you the headline and move on. Trump officials' dysfunction harms delivery of coronavirus drugs. So once again, we're going to have a supply chain problem now with the one that might actually work. Axios does it pretty quick. Let's see. Complete breakdown in communication coordination within the Trump administration, of course, has undermined the distribution of a promising treatment, according to senior officials who blah, blah, blah. I'm sure later on we'll find out they're anonymous for fear of the various normal things. Remdesivir. The drug hasn't made it to some of the high priority hospitals where it's most needed. And administration officials have responded by shifting blame. Can you believe it? And avoiding responsibility. Sources said, here's where it stands. Gilead Sciences, the company that makes the stuff, donated hundreds of thousands of doses. At least it's donated to the federal government after the FDA authorized it as an emergency treatment for coronavirus patients. I don't know whether they were as a willing donation or whether Trump said, tell you what, if you donate the stuff, we'll make sure that you get your approval really quick. More than 32,000 doses shipped and delivered on Tuesday to Indiana, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Tennessee, and Virginia. But many of those doses went to less impacted counties, an administration official said. Why are they less impacted? Because they're rural, they have lower population. Why did it go there? Because rural, low population counties vote Trump. That's probably the answer. I don't know if they really discuss why, but that's the answer. Some went to the wrong places, some went to the right places, said one senior official. We don't know who gave the order, Trump. And no one is claiming responsibility, which is who, now you know it's Trump. Yes, but that's only about 5% of the total doses that will be distributed. It says here, behind the scenes, senior Trump administration officials, including Pence and Birx were angered about what has transpired here. Wednesday's meeting of the task force, Pence personally directed HHS Secretary Azar to take more ownership for getting remdesivir. I order you to do it. Okay. In subsequent conversations with colleagues, Azar said he had not known about the arrangements that led to mass confusion and misaligned shipments the day before. He distanced himself from the debacle despite the fact that one of his top officials, Robert Kadlec, that guy whose name came up in the memos the other day, was intimately involved in the distribution plan. We never did finish that story. So that'll be a good assignment for you over the weekend. Let's see. There's more here. I'll hand you the article to read while you're waiting for Ralph Northam to come up. Another big story of the day that we haven't gotten to yet. Let me borrow from Eric Lewis and his write-up of it in his diary at Daily Kos. House Intelligence Committee releases 57 Russiagate witness transcripts. Collusion rampant. And he's got a link to where you can find the memos yourself and review those over the weekend. I have a feeling people are going to be digesting those, and the newspaper reporters are going to have some good stuff for us to discuss on Monday about that one. Eric says, here's what the website from the House Intelligence Committee says about these things. In 2017 and 18, the committee undertook an investigation of, the Trump-Russia story, which found that Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the U.S. presidential election. Russia's goals were to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process, denigrate Secretary Clinton, harm her electability and potential presidency. We further assess Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for Trump. Democrats on the committee affirmed that judgment, as did Special Counsel Mueller and the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee. Throughout the investigation, the committee uncovered significant evidence of Trump campaign efforts to seek, make use of, and cover up Russian help in the presidential election. To date, 2 witnesses have been convicted and sentenced to prison terms for lying and attempting to obstruct the committee's investigation. Ultimately, this pattern of misconduct and deceit continued when Trump once again sought to coerce a foreign government into providing him illicit assistance with his re-election campaign, this time from Ukraine. For his efforts, Trump was impeached by the House, became the first ever U.S. president to receive bipartisan votes to convict in the Senate. That one vote anyway. As part of its commitment to transparency, today the committee is releasing 57 transcripts of witnesses interviewed during the course of the Russia inquiry, as well as relevant material so that every American can see the facts and decide for themselves. All those transcripts, Eric tells us, can be read at the Intelligence Committee website, and he gives you the link. Witnesses, he says, include Felix Sater, we know about him, Rinat Akhmetshin, Corey Lewandowski, Steve Bannon, Rob Goldstone, Rona Graff, and many other sketchball traders. I like it. This, he goes on to say, might explain why Flynn was basically pardoned yesterday, of all days. And now he's off to read the transcripts, and I guess the updates find the juiciest bits. So you are directed, if you take a look at Eric's diary here, to, let's see, Shockwave's relaying of this juicy tidbit from the Sam Clovis transcript. He says most of what he says what he's made to disclose is about his witnessing Trump's entourage people talking about Russia connections. This part of a transcript caught Shockwave's attention, where Mr. Congressman Swalwell says, did he ever talk to you in person about Joseph Mifsud? Clovis says, I don't recall that at all. He mentions Putin's niece. Is that correct? Yes. Putin's niece? I remember now. The mysterious Putin niece has a name with a link here to a Politico story. And that does seem rather juicy and interesting. Also, a tidbit about Jared Kushner and his interview. What's that one about? Let's see if we can't read that one. Who spotted this one? Frog Belly White over at Daily Kos happens to have seen this one. I read the Kushner interview, and this was interesting. Schiff is asking all these questions. Schiff asks, have you had any meetings with any Russian government representatives or Russian nationals or dual Russian-American citizens that are not discussed in your written testimony? Kushner, in between fixing world peace, etc., and all the other things he does, says, I want to be very clear. If you're saying, my wife has a girlfriend who is Russian, and we go to a kid's birthday party or something like that, and we see her. Is that included in that as a Russian contact? I guess that means there was an awful lot. And, it's interesting. I'm sure that there are maybe some innocent ones like that in Jared Kushner's life, but then there's also the distinct possibility that Russians are going to put people around these guys because they know that they're ascending to power and they want them to think of it as an innocent contact. All right. Oh, very interesting. Certainly something good to do over the weekend. Lots more that we really could be discussing. I'm sure there's things we missed that we should have been discussing, but that's what Justice Putnam's show is all about. He's going to cover all that great stuff for you on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next. Let's see. Bill Barr dropping the criminal charges against Flynn is a shameful day for the Department of Justice, and he's going to have to deal with that because that's his name. Also, Ken Buck comes up. They'll be discussing more about what we read about yesterday, so maybe some brand new details about that. Trump has been illegally hiding his taxes from Congress for 400 days. A good update and a little bit more I can share with you.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, ready? Kooky America versus the sensible rest of the world. An Arizona Republican congressman says the virus safety rules in another state illegally violate religious liberty. And let's see, where Australia prepares to ease its coronavirus restrictions in 4-week stages, and New Zealand will back Taiwan, joining the World Health Organization.